So the average NFL wide receiver stands in at about 6 feet tall and weighs about 200 pounds. These guys are the perfect combination of athleticism, strength, and speed. And when we just take a look at the fact that these guys on average run about a 4.49 40, you get to see how impressive the wide receiver position is. The only position to compete with the wide receiver position for pure athleticism and quickness would be the cornerback position, which is slightly faster. Now, the blessing of being a wide receiver in the NFL comes from the fact that you do get paid a lot of money, even though your position is heavily reliant on your physical abilities. When we look at other positions who are highly reliant on their physical abilities, like the running back position and even like the cornerback position, we see that they don't get paid as much as the wide receiver position. And this is also taking into account the fact that the wide receiver don't have a lot of longevity with their position. They right now have some of the shortest careers in the NFL, but teams still invest in the wide receiver position. And that's why in today's video I want to take a look at the wide receiver position. We're going to go over the good, but also some of the glaring and concerning bads that I see happening right now to wide receivers that people aren't talking about. Now, the wide receiver position has been one of the most revolutionized position in the NFL, because when we take a look back in time, we can see that the wide receiver position wasn't used that often in the NFL. Passing at this time was considered very risky and inefficient, so most offenses during this time relied mostly on running backs to move their teams forward. Receivers for the most part were seen as afterthoughts to most teams. But then when we moved into the 1930s, that's when everything changed for the position, because we saw a freak of nature come out of nowhere and revolutionize the entire game of football as they knew it, and his name was Don Hutson. Hutson was the first true wide receiver in NFL history. He revolutionized everything about the passing game, mostly because of his speed and his precision route running.
When you compare him to the guys in the first 25 years of NFL history, which is all you can do, he's head and shoulders above in speed, in production, in toughness, in versatility.
This was the time when teams started to focus on wide receivers that had good route running, guys who could play on the fact that defenses at the time weren't really expecting excellent route runners. All of these factors made it very easy for Hutson and his abilities to take over the NFL and really show the world that the passing game can be a key factor in terms of winning. And by now, if you've been watching my videos, you would know this: the NFL is a league that is constantly growing and changing. So a lot of people, a lot of young kids saw what Hutson was doing and decided to implement that into their game. And that's exactly what happened in the 1960s and 70s, because we saw the emergence of the likes of Paul Warfield. We saw the emergence of the likes of Lance Altworth. I'm gonna go ahead, guys, and say he was one of the first people that popularized the wide receiver position with his personality. Bro even had a nickname, Bambi.
There was not a more appropriate name for anybody that has ever had to stand still and then be an athlete than Bambi. Every time his foot touched the ground, it was on his toes, and he would bounce like a young fawn.
Fix your goddamn team, Jerry. Now, as time went on, the league kept improving. The wide receiver position kept seeing the emergence of more and more better athletes. And in the 1980s and 90s, that's when guys like Jerry Rice really stepped into the forefront of the NFL. This is the era known for the big playmakers, guys. It was absolutely beautiful to watch, because football fans at the time, though they've gotten used to the Don Hutson of the world, they've gotten used to the Lance Altworth of the world, they weren't ready for a Jerry Rice. They weren't ready for a Michael Irvin. They weren't ready for a Randy Moss. These guys were setting records. They were leading the league. They were changing the way defenses play game in, game out. Their route running improved. Their ability to catch the ball and make contested catches all improved during this era. And I would say this era for sure inspired a lot of the wide receivers that we saw in the early 2000s, and definitely most of the receivers that we see right now. Guys like Michael Irvin were very huge in terms of popularizing the position, and we see his iconic Cowboys 88 jersey being used by CeeDee Lamb today, just showing the absolute prowess of these guys back in the day. All of that now though brings us to the current day of the wide receiver market, brings us to the absolute peak of the wide receiver market and the position. The wide receiver position has become one of the most versatile personnel group we see in the NFL. We have somewhat diminutive speedsters like Tyreek Hill, who's absolutely took over the NFL in the past couple years. And then we have the emergence of taller, bigger receivers still thriving in the league. All of these players together have elevated the wide receiver position to one of the most glamorous and now highest paid skill position apart from quarterback in the NFL. It's no longer just about catching passes for wide receivers nowadays. These guys could actually be faces of their franchise. That's how far we've come, ladies and gentlemen, to what the wide receiver is today. So for me, what makes the wide receiver position very interesting is the fact that it doesn't just consist of one specific receiver. It's not like the running back where your only job is to go out there and run through people. So you can choose to be an X receiver, which is your Jamar Chases or your Justin Jeffersons, and then you can be a Z receiver, which is a faster flanker guy that's gonna be beating people down the field, going for the deep ball, like your Tyreek Hills. These guys are super fast. And then we have the Y guys. These are guys that play in the slot. These guys are Amon-Ra St. Browns, Cooper Kupps. All of these guys make up the wide receiver position, but yet they do completely different things. And I do think that's why their price keep increasing more and more, because you have so many ways to build value in this one position, and you guys are all bunched together as doing the same thing and as playing the one position. So why have I told y'all about the history, about the fact that these wide receivers are getting paid so much money and their position is very versatile? They can do whatever they want and have a lot of fun with it. Well, I had to tell you guys that because that's what a lot of people know and have come to believe about this position. But the reality is the wide receiver position has a lot of challenges as well. And I'm going to break down some of the reasons why it actually sucks to be this position into 4 little parts. And then we're going to go over the actual future of this position in the NFL. Now, for number 1, the wide receiver position is sneakily very injury prone. When a lot of people look at the wide receiver position, they aren't really thinking physicality. They weren't really thinking injuries, because all you have to do is run a route and catch a ball. But this position has a very high chance of getting head injuries, especially concussions. When we just look at this 2024 season, we had a lot of wide receiver injuries, especially when it comes to head injury. We have guys like Chris Olave getting injured, and this isn't a problem that has just become more and more relevant today, because it's been an issue in the league for a while. And a huge example of this was Antonio Brown and the injury that literally ruined his life and ruined his career as we know it.
Lewis Harris's time, it seemed like Vontaze perfect, and yeah.
I am a superhero. I made it from Liberty City.
Sure.
Just because of his position and the parts of the field that he occupied, he got hit really hard in the head, and most people believe that led to severe brain damage that severely impacted the course of Antonio Brown's career. And that's another thing, it doesn't just stop with head injuries, guys. It goes on to the ACL, to your leg bone. These wide receivers put themselves in some of the most dangerous positions because of the moves that they have to make, because of the parts of the field that they have to traverse game in, game out. So as a receiver in the NFL, you have to understand it's not all sunshines and rainbows. You don't just go there and be a diva and have fun. No, your position is prone to a lot of injuries, a lot of sneaky injuries that people aren't there saying, oh, we have to take care of wide receivers for. I low-key think in the 2024 season, we had more injuries to wide receivers than we did to running backs, which is absolutely unheard of, guys. Now, for number 2, I want to talk about the fact that a lot of rookies are coming into the NFL extremely ready to play. These guys are coming in to take jobs, and it's absolutely absurd how much this is going to change the space for wide receivers in the NFL, because obviously there's so much supply, and that's obviously going to impact the demand and the salary for wide receivers going forward. And for number 3, guys, is the ineffectiveness of wide receivers in the current NFL. A lot of people think out there that wide receivers are still at the top of the market in the NFL, but that that is so far from the truth, because when we look at the popularity of the two high safeties, we see that a lot of teams have found ways to counteract the passing game very effectively. This has led to more instances of wide receivers not having an impact on the game, and teams are seeing this. Look at the Green Bay Packers moving on from Devontae Adams and still performing somewhat decently. Look at the Kansas City Chiefs move from Tyreek Hill to their wide receiver core right now. They have been winning Super Bowls since moving on from Tyreek Hill. And what does that show to the market? It shows that these wide receivers are a little overvalued, because you can do a lot better if you just draft a wide receiver that is highly prepared from college. All of that is going to impact the market for wide receivers going forward. And lastly, for me, is the crash out nature of wide receivers. I don't know if it's the concussions or the mood that they have to get in to play this position, but most wide receivers and wide receivers in general have this tendency of being very mentally unstable. We have guys like George Pickens, and like I mentioned, Antonio Brown. All these guys are extremely diva characters. Tyreek Hill is a diva. Stephon Diggs is a diva. CeeDee Lamb is a diva. So you have these two extremes of either divas or extremely great leaders. Teams now are figuring that out by this position, and all that puts a very bad rap on the position. And that's why when we take a look at the future of wide receivers, I think we're past the heydays of these guys getting paid crazy amount of money. Once Jamar Chase gets his contract, I think the market for wide receiver is definitely gonna go down. Teams are seeing that these guys are extremely easy to scheme against, and maybe going back to the run game might be more effective in terms of scoring points. But this is what it takes to be a wide receiver in the NFL, and all the struggles that you have to go through, plus the positives. Thanks for all the support though, guys. I really appreciate what y'all do, being here, watching me yap every day. Thank you. Bye bye. Mwah.